I'm Julie Roginsky here with Olga Lautman, and this is a Active Measures Live. We're talking this week about the big Cambridge Analytica scandal that really, if you needed to have any more evidence that the Kremlin interfered in the 2016 election to elect Donald Trump, this is the chapter for you, my friends. Olga, why don't you sum up briefly what this whole thing is about?
So this week we focused this chapter on Cambridge Analytica, Facebook, and how the Kremlin used these tools to one, suppress the vote, two, to make sure that Trump wins, and three, to create, as much attention and disinformation around Hillary Clinton as they could. And I mean, each chapter, this is chapter 11. And it is beyond infuriating how much evidence we have provided and put together. And again, 95% of it is all public, sources. How much evidence we put of every single thing that Russia did to attack the 2016 election, to swing the election for Trump, and that there has been zero accountability. And Cambridge Analytica is a perfect example. Here you had a company that was the parent company was SCL Group, and this company basically was into data mining and into really figuring out the personality trends, and everything how they can appeal to a voter. Um, and the crazy part is that this was using military and, psychological tactics, intelligence tactics in order to swing elections. And then, we had Cambridge, which was the offshoot, um, formed by the Mercer
Right.
family, Bannon. And here they literally created a weapon to really go through Facebook, go through social media, and to do an assessment of a person's character, what their vulnerabilities are, what their, touch points are. That way they can manipulate them for the 2016 election. And then we also covered Facebook. And specifically, I mean, this really is something. You had in sorry, you had in 2011 Zuckerberg meeting at that time with Prime Minister Medvedev on the sidelines of the G8 at the time. 2012 he traveled to Russia to meet with Medvedev and, you know, joked about how Facebook was going to be used in the upcoming US election. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And, the fact that you had Facebook representatives working at Trump Tower, you had Cambridge, based out of the Fox News headquarters on 6th Avenue in Manhattan. I mean, this just shows you how data was used and how people were targeted in order to make sure Trump, won. And this is just one chapter. I mean, every week we go through every single way that Russia used, different tactics to carry out this 2016 election attack. And, you know, uh, unlike Republicans who say, oh, this is just a bunch of memes, what did memes have to do with anything? I mean, we've laid out a very compelling case, I would say, over the past 11 chapters that this is way, way more than memes and that this was a full scale attack, that probably was not probably is the most successful attack since the Cold War.
I mean, look, I'm going to say this, and somebody who does do politics for a living and campaigns for a living, what Republicans have said is that Cambridge Analytica was very similar to what all campaigns do, including the Obama campaign in 2008, where they claimed they got this idea from, which is something called modeling. And I have done modeling on campaigns as well. Let me just explain to you what modeling is so that people understand the difference. Every time you swipe your card at Banana Republic versus the Gap, for instance, every time you buy life insurance, but you don't buy homeowners insurance, every time you make any kind of consumer decision, that data is packaged and sold and resold and resold and resold and eventually ends up in the hands of people who do modeling for political purposes. And there are companies on both the Republican and the Democratic side that have modeled every single voter in the United States. And what that means, very briefly and very, very, very broadly, I'm really kind of exaggerating here, but not by much, is that if I had an identical twin sister who lives next door to me, is married and has one child like I do, is exactly the same age as I am, has exactly the same income as I do, and exactly the same educational attainment that I do, you would think that we would vote the same. However, there are predictive behaviors based on potentially I have life insurance and she doesn't, or I shop at the Gap and she shops at Banana Republic, and I'm completely making this up. But there's about 1,400 to about, but not really. There's about 1,400 to about 2,500 different data points that comprise all of the model on each of us, and that model would allow somebody who does modeling for a living within a they're good at it, within a pretty precise bet to say that I would vote for candidate X, but my identical twin sister, based on whatever criteria they come up with, would not vote for candidate X, right? So that does exist, and it's an incredibly effective campaign tool. What was so different about this is that, first of all, this was funded by people who had interesting connections to the Kremlin and to Russian and Ukrainian Kremlin-aligned oligarchs. These are people who tried to be in touch and were in touch with good old WikiLeaks, which we talked about last week, and why this is so important, with Julian Assange, who does say that Alexander Nix, the head of Cambridge Analytica, tried to be in touch with him during this period. This is a web of psychopredictive behavior, potentially funded by and in conjunction with Russian oligarchs and Facebook, which, don't forget, a large chunk of Facebook at the time was owned, and I'm not sure if it is, but this is right, Zuckerberg went to Moscow shortly after Facebook went public. A big investor in Facebook was a man named Yuri Milner, who was and continues to be somebody very close to the Kremlin. You had Facebook staff embedded in the Trump campaign, literally working out of both Trump Tower and in Texas, where they set up their entire sort of techno aspect of the Trump campaign. So when you connect all the dots here and you put all of this together, and the fact that Cambridge Analytica got their initial psychopredictive behavior model from a Cambridge professor who also happened to have been doing some work in Russia, you got to ask the question as to, again, Russia keeps popping up. And Olga, I guess the only thing to say here is, after 11 chapters of this, and we've gotten texts and emails from people saying this is too dense, this is so dense, you guys are writing 3,000, 5,000 word, missives every week. Well, yeah, the reason that it's dense and the reason that we're providing all of this information is because when Donald Trump says it's the Russia, 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 Russia hoax, and the media shrugs and says, well, he says it's a hoax, the other side says it's not a hoax. Oh, well, this is too complicated to figure out. Let's move on. That would be akin to Olga saying the earth is round, and I saying the earth is flat, and the media saying, oh, you will never know. So we're not going to bother to try to find out. That's why we're providing all this information for you. We get it. It is really dense. I asked my husband yesterday whether he read our chapter, and he said, "I got to tell you, it was I didn't have time." So he'll get around to it. But the point is, we get it, but we are also deeply committed to underscoring not just that it's not a hoax, but proving that it's not a hoax and holding media to account for failing to do this work. I cannot reiterate enough how much we say this every single week. It is a crime and a shame that Olga Lapman and Julie Roginsky, who have 20 other things they're doing with their lives, are spending every single day and all of our weekends, not with our children, but writing this stuff. right? Because those
Yep.
5,000 word missives don't write themselves, and
No.
researching all of this stuff and putting it all together. And the reason we do it is because the New York Times won't. The Washington Post certainly won't these days. CNN won't. All of them have incredible resources all over the world, including in Moscow, including people who are close to the Kremlin who could help them do this, but they're not. And, if there's one more reason to understand why corporate media sucks, like, here's one more for you every week,
Yep.
but especially this one, especially this one.
And I just want to add, you have the experience with modeling. I mean, this takes modeling to a whole new level
Well,
because this is not just predicting, oh, Olga, worked with climate change organizations. Again, I'm making this up, so therefore she probably leans liberal and then based on her patterns. This is actually looking for your flaws and vulnerabilities and fears. This is where Cambridge was, weaponized because then it could say, "Oh, Olga, had the son, and she's petrified, of something happening," and then, as a result, you would have the Kremlin and Prigozhin and the troll factory and feeding you everything that's crime related. And then linking it back to the Clinton campaign and Democrats. So this is even more agreed, like more than just
well,
modeling. This
and
is like looking for people's vulnerabilities and saying, oh, this one's prone to conspiracies. We're going to start pushing via algorithms conspiracies towards this. This one is afraid of immigrants or anti immigrant. We're going to feed more content of this. This one is scared of crime. We're going to work on that anxiety of crime and we're going to, take it to another level. And at the same time, link it to Trump being the one who will solve all of this, while Clinton and Democrats were the ones behind all of this. So this is where it takes it to a like another level. And I always joked that I remember in the early 2000 no later 2000s whenever Facebook launched and I used it. I don't use it anymore. I remember them constantly feeding these psychological tests. And I always like to my head thought, are these like being fed by Russia? Because it's like, what's your perfect first date? Like random questions. Would you want to see a movie outside or inside or whatever? But this was building on this, on who you are as a person and kind of psychologically.
and you just raised a really good point. So anybody who used Facebook, you know, back then, you had these little tests that you would have to opt into, right? And it would be these really random, as Olga said, little random quizzes, and people would post them to be like, "Oh, haha, like I'm Sex in the City. I'm a Carrie. I'm a Samantha. I'm a this. I'm a that." Right? And you had people who were legitimately taking these quizzes because they were, to
They're
brain.
fun.
It's a brain break in the middle of work. You kind of do these stupid quizzes and you go back to your boring job. Well, at how Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg and all these people got away with this. Sheryl Sandberg, who was then held up as this paragon of women's virtue, Mark Zuckerberg, who's hailed as a genius, especially after the social network came out. Even as that was all happening, they were giving this information to, now they claim they didn't do it on purpose and they didn't know what it was being used for. Cambridge Analytica was getting that information. Facebook people were working in concert, hand in hand, with the Trump campaign and Cambridge Analytica to psychoanalyze each of us. And don't forget, at that point, I don't know, now it's over 1 billion people on Facebook, or maybe even several billion, but it was close. In this country, a lot of people were on Facebook. And, you know, every time I see Trump, and I saw Trump last year going crazy on Mark Zuckerberg and how he wanted to arrest him, I would laugh. I don't even know if Trump understands or appreciates what Mark Zuckerberg did for him, but I'm not so sure that without Mark Zuckerberg, Trump would be in the White House the first time around, and then subsequently the second time around. And again, in every article written about Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg and Facebook, I don't understand why this isn't mentioned. because it relates to what the media considers to be Trump's analysis of the Russia hoax, and they just don't want to touch it because they don't want to go down the road. Russia suddenly you can't even talk about Russia anymore for fear of being accused of being part of the Russia hoax. And I got to tell you, like, all of this is interconnected. All of this is interconnected. Russian investors, the people who came up with Cambridge Analytica, Steve Bannon was a vice president at the company, even if he was running Breitbart. Breitbart, whose motto was from their founder, Andrew Breitbart, politics is downstream from culture, and he was right. Facebook was the culture, and politics came downstream from it. Cambridge Analytica, which had all sorts of strange connections on their board to Russian oligarchs and aligned and maybe people who are not Russian, but certainly aligned with the Kremlin or with Ukraine oligarchs who were very much in the Kremlin's pocket at the time.
And mafia links.
Yeah, and mafia links. And, you put all of this together and you have to tip your hat to the Russians. Because while we were playing checkers, they were playing chess for a long time. We are very much in this country all about instant gratification. They were playing the long game for years. For years. And every way. And as much as everybody thinks Elon Musk sucks on Twitter, and he does, as much as everybody thinks the Chinese suck on TikTok, and soon to be the Ellisons will suck on TikTok along with the Murdochs, and they do, spare a moment for Mark Zuckerberg.
And just to add, for anyone who has not read the article, I mean, I really suggest you read this chapter. And I believe it was 2013, 2012, late 2012 or 13, Zuckerberg signed an agreement with Yandex, which is Russia's search engine.
Yes.
And, it was specifically to share all the data that Facebook basically accumulates, including geolocation and everything, on Ukraine. I mean, frankly, all the data. And at the time, they expanded it to Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and whatnot.
And Yandex, sorry,
Yandex,
Yandex is the Russian search engine, the big Russian search engine.
they're like our Google.
Right.
Now, Yandex themselves in 2011 or 12, I mean, if you didn't have, the suspicion, they confirmed it for you, that they themselves said that they were sharing information with Russia's security services, FSB. So here you had, as Ukraine, for instance, was going through their protest with Euromaidan, with Yanukovych, with everything that was happening. Here at the same time, you had Facebook basically providing all the information. And most of the protesters, this wasn't the only one. I mean, in Belarus, you had protests, around the like 2000, around that time, you had several protests, and a lot of people, especially in Russia, in Ukraine, and a lot of, Eastern European countries, were using Facebook to communicate during protest, where to go, where to meet up. And here you had Zuckerberg, who intentionally signed an agreement to give all this data to Yandex, knowing that publicly they said, prior to the agreement signed, that they cooperate with Russia's security services. So, I mean, this is the equivalent of, a company here, someone signing a contract, I don't know, a British company signing a contract with Facebook, and Facebook, or Google, and Google a year prior saying, we cooperate with FBI and hand them all of this data. So I mean, this in itself, Facebook was used in so many ways, but it was also used during protest. And I mean, you had Ukrainians at the time using Facebook to plan the protest, across and strategize and whatnot, organize. And at the same time, you had many cases where security forces, had information prior to something happening, just like inside of Russia when Facebook was being used to coordinate Navalny protests and other protests. You had security services, appearing at that corner prior to the people assembling on that corner. And then people would go on Facebook again and say, you know what, security services are on this corner, we need to move. And have a different meetup location. But this just shows you, I mean, and this is before it even got turned towards U.S. elections. And something again, never. I mean, I've never. I think I no, I've never read an article mentioning Facebook signing with Yandex. Meanwhile, this is on the Facebook page. You don't even, I mean, besides Russian news reporting this, Facebook themselves had posted it at that time in, I believe, 2012, that they signed this agreement and specifically what the parameters of the agreement were.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something really just crucial and, you know, something for people to know about and to really appreciate what's happening because otherwise it's just not going to end and it's not ending. And I don't want people to think that just because this happened in 2016 that it was over, they accomplished their mission.
Yep.
It is not over. In fact, the fact that you have Trump's crypto fund right now that exists without us knowing who's actually investing in it. All of it is just incredibly, incredibly difficult. So I want to be super clear with people that this is a really of all the things that we've done, this chapter I think is really important for people to read. I see in the chat people are asking us where to find it. You can go to instead of us putting the link in because we're on our phones, so it's hard for us to type it in. Go either to my Substack, Salty Politics, or to Olga's Substack, I'm Asking Russia. You will see a active measures tab in both of those. Click on the tab. You could either read this most recent chapter, which is chapter 11, or you could read the entire series, take a day, get a drink, have a strong one, because it's pretty shocking, and read it so you know what's happening. So you're prepared for the next time. So you know what's going to happen. My friends, Donald Trump is going to invoke the Insurrection Act soon. I just want you to be prepared. And when he does, you need to understand the tactics that other authoritarians use to oppress their people. And this series is a good start because that's where we are right now. And you will be less surprised about what's happening if you do that. So please
And
go
more
ahead and read
prepared.
and are prepared. So please go ahead, read active measures, read this one chapter I think is really critical. It's confusing. There are a lot of names, there are a lot of explanations. It is designed to be confusing by the Russians so that people can't keep track of what happened. You need obviously like those crazy flow charts that you had Carrie had on Homeland where like, one person connecting to the other and you seem like you're a little crazy when you're doing it, but the reality is none of this is straightforward. None of this is meant to be straightforward. It's meant to be confusing so that if you're the New York Times, you throw up your hands and you say, oh, the Russia hoax, we might as well we don't have time to really delve into that. So, you know, I just I just want you guys to be aware, and everybody wants to be aware. You're asking why Soros and Pritzker don't start a social media app. I think they're looking for people who actually are going to start it, and then they feel like they want to invest. They invest. I don't know if people know this. The Bulwark, which is doing great work, was funded originally by James and Catherine Murdoch. James Murdoch is the youngest son of Rupert Murdoch. He felt a little guilty about all the blood money he's made, so he and Catherine decided to invest in a bunch of never Trump Republicans who started the Bulwark, and they're doing a fan. Whether it's Bill Kristol or it's Tim Miller or J.B. Last or Sarah Longwell, they're doing amazing work. That's where it comes from. So we've got to build it ourselves. Like we cannot rely on anybody. We have to
No.
rely on ourselves. But what this series does is show you what the Russians are capable of, what Trump is capable of, what MAGA is capable of. And that was in 2016 before he had any power. Nobody thought he was going to win. Now his aligned media people control CBS Paramount. They are about to potentially buy Warner Brothers Discovery, which means they'll control HBO and CNN, which is why Bill Maher and people like that are in the ascendant, and people like Scott Jennings. They just purchased TikTok, which means that the algorithm is going to squash all of us. If you're on TikTok, I'm not, and promote all of their stuff and collect data again, the way Facebook did on people, so they can feed that into their get out the vote efforts potentially. Um, and I can go on. So you cannot rely on social media platforms anymore. You cannot rely on um, corporate media anymore. Certainly, Google just paid a huge bribe out, to, settlement slash bribe out to Trump. Um, so there goes YouTube potentially. I don't know how long Substack is going to be around. The point is, we need to be prepared. We need to be prepared. So please just be prepared. Read our stuff. We're not saying that because we're trying to get clicks on it. We actually are not paywalling this. We're not making money on it. We just want people to know what's happening, because we're so passionate about people understanding what's going on in the world right now. So with that, Olga, any last words to add?
Yes, just to add, as dire as things are, and as hijacked as everything is getting between media, social media, and everything else, um, I think that's why the most important focus should be on building networks, starting from your neighborhood, expanding out and out, because at the end of the day, like I always say, like it's the people who control the power. So if we really, enough of us to wake up, well, we're awake, but if enough people in America wake up and band together, we can push back on this.
Yeah, and we are incredibly grateful to all of you for this community that we've built, both doing these lives, the Pax Americana show on Thursday, which is amazing active measures. Eventually we will put an end to how Russia interfered in the 2016 election. This series for Pax Americana will go on hopefully for a very long time. For those of you who show up to our Wednesday uh, seminar that we're doing again tomorrow. Thank you to all of you. And just thank you from the bottom of our heart. This is how we win. We build community together and we make sure that community is able to fight back. We are stronger than they are because there's more of us than there is of them, than there are of them.
And smarter.
And smarter. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. And we will see you back here at 11 a.m. Eastern for Pax Americana on Thursday. And we will see you, for those of you who are part of our seminar, tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern on Zoom. So thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.